Dust lifted like ghosts in the late afternoon, swirling over the auction yard where men with hard faces gathered to trade in other men's failures. The sun burned low, a copper coin in a pale sky, and voices rose and fell with the rhythm of bargains struck. Elias Boone stood at the edge of it all, his boots planted in dirt that had known too many broken dreams. His hat brim shadowed his eyes, though it could not hide the weariness etched across his face. He had drifted too long, carrying the silence of old battlefields inside him, and though his pockets were nearly empty, his heart still carried the ache of wanting a place that might, for once, not spit him back out. The auctioneer rattled on, swinging his gavel like a conductor with no orchestra, listing off wagons, broken tools, and scrap land. Then came the announcement of a ranch on the town's edge, neglected, unwanted, smothered in debt and rumor. The crowd broke into laughter. "Who'd waste a dime on that cursed patch?" Someone jeered, and heads shook with amusement. The auctioneer, desperate, asked for a bid, any bid at all. Silence stretched, the kind that grows thick as tar, until Elias's voice cut through. $1. Every head turned, disbelief flickering in the dry air. A few laughed, a few sneered, and the gavel struck anyway. Sold. The word rang final, and with it Elias Boone became the owner of something that cost him next to nothing and yet carried the weight of possibility. The crowd parted as he walked away, some muttering about a fool chasing ghosts, others already predicting his failure. Elias didn't answer them. He had been called worse things in his life, and the laughter of men had never stopped his feet from moving forward. He rode through the sagging gates at dusk, his horse slow beneath him as if even the animal could sense the heaviness of this place. The ranch lay swallowed in weeds, fences collapsing like broken ribs, windows blind with dust. The barn leaned into the wind as if bowing to its own ruin. He dismounted and stood for a long moment, the silence pressing into his ears, broken only by the distant rasp of cicadas. This was no kingdom, no promise of glory. But it was his, for one coin, and after years of wandering, even a ruin could feel like a kind of beginning. Inside the house, floorboards groaned beneath his boot. Dust drifted in lazy columns through cracks in the roof, and cobwebs hung like forgotten curtains. Yet he felt something beneath it all, a heartbeat, faint and waiting. He opened shutters to let in the last light of evening, and in that instant something shifted. He was not alone. At first it was only a shadow, the faint scrape of movement from the kitchen. Elias stilled, his hand brushing instinctively toward the knife at his belt. Then the lantern flared, someone had lit it, and a girl stepped into view. Her hair tumbled wild around her shoulders, her dress torn but once fine, her eyes sharp as flint. She was young, though life had already carved resilience into her face. Barefoot, unafraid, she stood between him and the table as if she had every right to be there. "You don't belong here," she said, her voice carrying the rasp of someone who had fought too long against silence. Elias studied her, words slow in coming. "Bought this place today. Paid my dollar fare." "It's mine," she answered, chin lifted. "Always has been. My family's blood is in these walls." Her pride struck him harder than her defiance. He saw the dirt smudged on her hands, the thinness in her frame, the raw edge of someone abandoned yet unwilling to fold. For a moment neither moved. They simply looked at one another across the dim light, two ghosts testing if the other was flesh. "Finally," Elias said, "then we got ourselves a problem." The days that followed pressed that problem harder. She gave her name, Clara May Dalton, but little else. She claimed no kin, offered no explanation for why she remained in a house the town had written off. She would not leave, though she had no papers, no rights. Elias thought more than once of throwing her out, yet each time he looked at her he found the weight in her eyes familiar. It was the look of someone discarded, carrying shame not of her making. And so he let her stay, though the air between them stayed taut as a wire. In town, word spread quick as wildfire. Sheriff Judd Kersey paid Elias a visit, his broad frame filling the doorway. "You've bought yourself a curse, Boone," he said, voice low, measuring. That girl, she's a leftover, clinging to scraps. You keep her there, you'll find yourself tarred with the same brush. Elias listened, silent, while the sheriff's wife, Martha, sharpened her tongue among the townsfolk. They whispered that Clara had been abandoned, that she was squatting, that she was no better than a beggar child hiding in walls. When Elias passed through for supplies, he felt the stares at his back, the laughter curling behind hands. Clara's name carried pity and disdain in equal measure. His own was now tethered to hers. Back at the ranch, he found her mending the porch step, needle in hand where a hammer should be. She did not look up when he approached. Shame burned in her posture, though her hands moved steady. For a long moment he only watched. Then, instead of scolding, he set down the wood he'd hauled and began to work beside her. The silence held more meaning than words might have managed. That night, Clara lingered by the window while Elias sat in the shadows. Lantern light pooled around her face, revealing exhaustion but also a defiance that would not die. She broke the silence at last. They all think I'm nothing, that I should have disappeared when my folks did. Elias looked at her, his voice low and rough as gravel. World thinks the same of me, more often than not. The words hung there, a fragile bridge between them. For the first time, Clara's eyes softened. She did not thank him, nor did he expect her to. But when she set bread on the table before him, rough, meager, but offered, he understood it as more than food. It was the first gesture of trust, small as it was. Elias ate in silence, tasting not just the bread but the possibility that two abandoned souls might carve out a place where the world had only left ruin. The ranch creaked and sighed around them, yet for the first time it no longer felt empty. And so the truce remained, fragile but alive. The ranch was not just broken wood and weed. It had become a house where silence carried weight, where two strangers, each scarred in different ways, began to recognize themselves in the other. Elias Boone, who had bought a dream for 1 coin, and Clara May Dalton, who had hidden herself within its walls, now stood at the edge of something neither yet understood. The night closed around them, the cicadas fell quiet, and the house held its breath. The story was only beginning. Morning broke soft and gold across the ranch, spilling through cracks in the roof, and setting the dust adrift like tiny motes of fire. Elias rose early, the habits of war and wandering still etched into his body, and found Clara already outside. She was bent over the fence line, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair caught by the wind. Her hands moved with a quiet determination, binding broken rails with rope, as though by sheer will she could hold the whole place together. He watched a moment before stepping into the work beside her, wordless as always, but his presence enough to make her pause. She did not thank him, nor did he expect it. Their rhythm had become one of silent gestures. Her setting bread on the table at night, him repairing shutters in the morning. Two people who had been left behind, each refusing to say aloud how much they needed the other. But the world beyond the ranch was not so silent. In town, the gossip had sharpened into knives. Elias could feel it in the stares that followed him at the mercantile, the whispers that broke into laughter just as he passed. Martha Kersey's voice, sharp as a crow's, carried across the store. "That ranch girl clings like a burr, doesn't she? Squatter blood through and through." Others chuckled, but their eyes flicked quickly to Elias, gauging his reaction. He gave them none. He had long ago learned that words are often less a shield than silence. Still, their judgment pressed on him, heavier each week. When the sheriff rode out to the ranch, Clara's back stiffened the instant she saw him. Judd Kersey dismounted with a deliberate slowness, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol as though to remind them both of his authority. "Boone," he said, his voice steady, "this girl's presence here puts you at odds with the law. You bought this place clean. She has no right to it, and if you shelter her, you carry her shame as your own. You'd be wise to cut ties before it drags you down." Clara said nothing, though the color drained from her cheeks. She held herself rigid, jaw tight, eyes on the ground. Elias felt the weight of her silence, the years of judgment she had endured, each word of the sheriff striking against old scars. He answered slowly, his voice rough. This ranch doesn't feel wrong with her here. Don't ask me to put her out. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. The town won't forgive a man who ties himself to another's ruin. Think carefully. With that, he mounted again and left the dust of his warning behind. That evening, Clara worked later than usual, chopping wood long after the light had gone. Elias found her by the woodpile, her hands blistered, her shoulders trembling with the effort of holding herself together. She spoke before he could. I'm only making things worse for you. They'll never let me live down what I am. Her voice cracked, though she fought to keep it steady. Maybe it's best if I go. He wanted to answer, but the words tangled in his throat. Instead, he took the axe from her hands, set it aside, and guided her back toward the house. She resisted at first, then allowed herself to follow, though she would not meet his eyes. The next morning, Elias rose to find her gone. The bed where she had lain was cold, and on the table lay a folded scrap of paper. In a trembling hand she had written, "You deserve a clean start. I cannot be your burden." The word struck deeper than any insult from town, because they carried not only her shame but also the conviction that she was beyond saving. Elias saddled his horse without thought, the note still clutched in his hand, and rode hard toward town. He found her at the edge of the square, a small bundle of belongings at her feet, her shoulders squared against the stares of those gathering to watch. Martha Kersey was there, whispering sharply to the women beside her, her gaze gleaming with triumph. And then the sheriff stepped forward, his expression grim. "Clara May Dalton," he said, voice carrying, "you've no rightful claim to that ranch. You'll come with me until we find where to place you." He reached for her arm. The moment stretched thin, every eye in town fixed on the scene. Elias pushed through the crowd, his boots striking hard against the dirt, and came to stand between Clara and the sheriff. His voice was steady, though his chest hammered. "She goes nowhere without me." The sheriff's hand tightened on his pistol belt. "You mean to claim her, then? You'll bear her disgrace as your own." Elias let the silence answer for him. Slowly, deliberately, he reached for Clara's hand and folded it into his. She flinched at the contact, startled by the suddenness, but he held firm, not in passion but in defiance. His words came low, clear, and unshaking. "She belongs to that land as much as I do. And I won't see her torn from it." A murmur rippled through the crowd, disbelief and wonder tangled together. Some shook their heads, muttering of foolishness. Others, softer voices, seemed stirred by the sight of a man standing against shame not his own. Martha hissed, but her words faltered when no one echoed them. The sheriff's eyes lingered on Elias, weighing him, then finally released Clara's arm. "You'll answer for what comes of this," he warned, before turning away. The crowd began to disperse, though whispers still clung to the air. Elias did not release Clara's hand as he led her back through town, the stairs burning against them like sun on bare skin. She kept her gaze fixed ahead, chin lifted, though he could feel the tremor in her grip. When they reached the edge of town, she finally spoke, her voice hushed but filled with something new. "You didn't have to do that." Elias glanced at her, his face unreadable. "Maybe I did." They rode back in silence, yet the silence was no longer heavy. It was alive with something unspoken, fragile but steady. At the ranch, Elias dismounted first, offering her his hand again. She hesitated, then took it, stepping down with the smallest trace of trust softening her guarded eyes. The house waited, battered and broken, but no longer empty. For the first time since Elias had set foot on the land, it felt claimed, not by deed, not by coin, but by the choice of two souls who refused to be cast out. The ranch creaked around them, wind moving through its bones, but its heartbeat was stronger now, carried in the steps of those who walked through its doors together. That night, as the cicadas rose in their endless chorus and the lantern burned low, Elias sat across from Clara in the flicker of light. Their words were few, but each carried more weight than any declaration might. She passed him bread again, and he accepted it, their hands brushing in the space between. The ranch was theirs now, his by law, hers by defiance, and both by the simple act of staying. And though the world might still laugh, they had chosen to endure together. In that choice lay the beginning of something greater than either could have named, the fragile seed of home, waiting to grow.